What would you do if you found out that you were the descendant of monster slayers? People that literally hunted the terrifying creatures of the night. That's where I found myself. These were their tools. And it seems their spirits in the ancestral home keep pushing me to tell their story, which I have in the various journals and papers that they left behind. So that's what I'm doing, starting with my great-great-great-grandfather, Harold Oldry, going into the many horrors that he faced off against, the powers that he once wielded and lost, and the unbelievable alliances that he forged with some of the most incredible, impressive human beings on Earth. Hey everybody, still craziness going on in the world, but a lot of people are asking for more, so I'm just going to go ahead and move on with this Sons of Man video. This is not the really in-depth one that I was talking about, but I've just been studying a lot, researching what I've got here from the trunk and from my great-grandfather, stuff online, and just putting stuff together myself. For those of you who don't know, the Sons of Man, I've discovered a lot of information about them because of my ancestors. They were a Catholic order of monster hunters dating back to the Crusades. To give an easy idea of what I'm talking about, people have compared them to the BPRD from Hellboy, the Brotherhood of Light from Castlevania, the Men of Letters from Supernatural, and there's even a good bit that's reminiscent of the SCP Foundation, which you might be familiar with from the internet. Now, the big differentiation here, other than being real, is the fact that these were specifically a sect of the Catholic Church, and that it came almost directly out of the First Crusades. Specifically two warriors, one whose name I've only able to find being Sir Baldwin, the other is Raphael Coron. I've also found things that lead me to believe that there is some relation with them and the Knights Templar. There also seem to be elements within the order that date back much further than the Crusades, going back to the 12 Paladins of Charlemagne. Baldwin was apparently one of these paladins, and Caron went on to become a monster hunter for hire, part of a guild. Now, these two men came back together later, and supposedly were able to convince the Catholic Church to fund an army to deal with supernatural threats. They claimed that this was to deal with the myriad supernatural threats in the world, but it seems like there was actually another secret reason for this. One that for a long time was only shared between the two men. There was apparently a third crusader who was instrumental to their prowess and reputation. A tactician that both men came to believe was delving heavily into occult magic. Cardone even came to believe that the reason he had become such a prolific warrior was that this man had been secretly working dark magic on him without his knowledge, enhancing his prowess, capabilities, and courage, which he considered an insufferable blasphemy. That man was named Dmitri Vedeska. Both men believed, given his genius and temperament, that he would quickly climb the ladder of whatever dark forces he was working on. So when they came together on that fateful night to discuss the formation of the Sons of Man, they used that idea of a supernatural war against myriad creatures as an excuse, which, while true, was not the main goal of the Order. Now, this is a goal that they did succeed in 500 years later, but according to the writings that I had, Dmitri, or the Unmaker as they came to call him, was able to escape from hell twice. I am still researching, but basically he is one hell of a scary dude. So I get a lot of questions like this, and I think it's the perfect time to really go through all those, given, the political environment right now. It's kind of hard and weird to make more in-depth videos, so I'll go ahead and run through the opinions I have on all the different crazy stuff that's going on here in the house. First, I basically have to start with that I do believe that my ancestors did deal with supernatural entities and creatures. That's based on the things that I found here in the house, as well as what I found in my own research. I also believe that my great-grandfather Leopold did uncredited work on the movie Haxan, that he did so using his familial knowledge of such subjects, and that much of the movie and the messages therein were based on his grandfather Harold's experiences with a witch druid named Brigid. Not least because the climax of their work took place in the mythical island of Blakula in Sweden, which is where the movie Haxan was produced. I believe, as Harold did, that this witch druid was actually the avatar of the goddess Brigid, who was an important Celtic goddess who was associated with the Fae, among other things. I believe that this tree in my backyard is a fairy tree, and the seeds of which were gifted by Bridget to my family for protection. I believe that this doll, Frogette, holds the soul of a young girl, which was placed there by some kind of madman using some kind of magic. My ancestor Harold was ordered to destroy it, and he kept it instead. I believe this container that was inside that ancestral trunk holds some kind of dark entities or items. I know at least some kind of occult idols, either associated with demons directly or used in different occult rituals. Possibly other items as well, associated with or desired by different supernatural entities. I believe that this clock was entrusted to my ancestor by someone with the ability to manipulate time, because it once held a hex bag with what looked like some kind of strange key, and a piece of paper with the date February 22nd, 2022 written on it. On that date, it disappeared. Searching throughout the property, I found it in an old suitcase in the shed where it looked like it had been sitting for decades. Inside was no longer the same items, but a note addressed directly to me, with initials that correspond to somebody that my ancestor wrote about in his journal that he considered the most brilliant scientific mind in the world. I believe the people who have been calling and trying to intimidate me into selling these items are members of the Sons of Man, a Catholic order of supposed monster hunters and exorcists that my family worked with several times in the past. I believe the only reason they have not come to take these items themselves is because the spirit of my ancestor Harold, once one of their most decorated members, protects the house. Hey everybody, sorry if I look a little raggedy, didn't get great sleep last night, tossing and turning a lot, but I'm just going to go into it because I don't have a lot of time in these videos. This is a continuation of what I was saying yesterday because I didn't really get a lot of what I wanted across. Okay, quick disclaimer, this is just some classical art that I found on Google that I use, but I use this to represent the Crusaders that I'm talking about. Dmitri Vedeska, Raphael Caron, the important ones here. Now, Vedeska went on to be considered basically like a Dark Lord type figure. They considered him the most dangerous person in the world. And the reason that Caron was so dangerous was because this guy, who was so into dark, magical type things, had been manipulating him physically and spiritually into a kind of enhanced being. Now, most of you know I get my information about all this from my ancestor Harold Aldry's notes. He was a member of the order that Caron started. And while he was a member many, many years later, Caron being a founder, and, the stories about him were basically the mythology of this order, and they all knew about him. And that mythology ties into a lot of rumors, as well as other mysteries from the order's history. Now, Harold had an obsession with Vedeska, particularly how he was killed, because his own father and grandfather had to face him together when he came back. And he claimed to be having nightmares about him himself. This wasn't apparently something like, they were waiting, anticipating for him to come back. They killed him, they thought he was gone, and then hundreds of years later he just pulled himself back up out of hell. Harold was able to find that when he was killed the first time, there was something of a controversy surrounding what actually happened. Because there was some kind of super paladin who wasn't a paladin, who was the actual one who carried it out, and nobody who was active at the time knew who this person was, except for supposedly the very highest up in the order. What they did know about him is that he was big, basically indestructible, covered head to toe in armor, and wearing a helmet something like this, which was far outside the norm for any Sons of Man type of troop or paladin or anybody to be using. For some reason they wanted to cover his face. Now this ties into another pretty intense rumor that a lot of members of the Sons of Man would talk about, like kind of in secret, was, this idea that Raphael, after the things that had been done to him by Dmitri, he didn't just die like normal people do. If you know anything about the incorruptibility, supposedly, of Roman Catholic saints and Eastern Orthodox, you can go ahead and pause to read. Something like that is supposedly what ended up happening to him, and they kept him under one of their cathedrals. I said the Vatican last time. That was a mistake. It was not the Vatican, but I don't want to say the name of the one that supposedly had him. It also sounds similar to me, to this Japanese practice. I don't want to butcher it, but it's Soku Shinbutsu. You can go ahead and pause to read that too. The idea here being that they woke him up for the fight, kind of like Master Chief in Halo. Hey, it's really late, but there's something on my mind. You guys keep tagging me in it. I've been thinking about it the last couple of days. It's really creeped me out. I think it is directly related to what I've been talking to you about very recently. If you remember, I told you when I first started talking about Rafael Caron and the rumors about him that he was buried under an important church. At first I said the Vatican, but then I corrected myself. I didn't want to say exactly where it was, but it was not the Vatican, it was a different important church. One of those videos and my video about satanic cults was actually taken down for community guidelines violations. It says sexual content. I don't understand it. I'm leery to release details sometimes, but I'm just going to say it. It was Notre Dame. And I know a lot of you have seen this because you've been tagging me in it. Now, obviously, I can't be sure of anything, but it just seems like a crazy coincidence. I was talking about this last week. This just came out a couple days ago. Now, the years don't line up perfectly, but if the idea was that they were bringing him back out of the crypt, who knows how many times or when they started. You guys get to be confused and creeped out with me. So I've been getting a lot of questions about my last video with this thing about the sarcophagus discovered under Notre Dame. Apparently made of lead, very strange situation finding it there, and how it relates to what I've been talking about here on my page. If you go on my page right now, very recent video about a man named Rafael Caron. What I'm saying is I believe he is the person that is in that coffin. I had some other videos about him you can see down here at the bottom. One of them was removed for community guideline violations, which seemed very suspicious to me. I've had a few removed for things like that. But yeah, a lot of good information about this guy, and I'll get into what basically the story is. He started out as a prolific crusader. He was from France. You know, if you look into the first crusades, knights from France were some of the only actual experienced and knowledgeable warriors that went on the Christian side. He went on to be one of the two founders of the Sons of Man, which was an organization within the Catholic Church that supposedly dealt with things like exorcism, supernatural creatures, other kinds of supernatural threats. Now, it was rumored within this organization that a lot of his prowess in battle came from occult meddling from somebody else that became a pretty big enemy of his, and that when he passed away, when he died many years later, he was incorrupt, like the saints that don't decompose, and the rumor was that they could pull him up out of the crypt, out of death, to use as something like a super soldier against really bad things. Now, my source of information on this stuff is the journals of my ancestors who served in that same organization hundreds of years later and were privy to the rumors and stories therein. So I know I talk about a lot of crazy stuff on here, and this is hard to believe, but, you know, I'm just telling you what I found and what the claims are. And when stuff like this happens, you know, I was talking about this a week ago, I talked about it months ago, parts of it, and then this just happened like 3 or 4 days ago. So I just, you know, it's pretty interesting. In the notes from my ancestors, the rumor was originally kept under the Vatican. Because he was French, he was later transferred his body to Notre Dame. So a lot of people are asking about how I have this information regarding this 700-year-old sarcophagus found at Notre Dame, or my theories about it. You know, people are Googling stuff and they're not finding anything. You know, a lot of this information is stuff that I am assuming has been suppressed since hundreds of years before the internet even existed. So let me get into why I know about it. This is, of course, a really condensed version. You can go onto my page and I have all videos about all this stuff, so check it out. I inherited a house filled with the possessions of my ancestors going back hundreds of years, and it is demonstrated that they were a member of this organization I spoke of, the Sons of Man, the one that was founded by this guy, Rafael Caron, who I believe was in that coffin. You know, this was hundreds of years after he was active, but that's where the information comes from. And as I've said previously, this organization, the Sons of Man, was founded to take on supernatural threats. For those of you who still feel that it's strange that, you know, nothing else has leaked about this stuff, I just want to mention my ancestor Harold Oldry was probably the highest ranking member of the organization ever to leave it. He was a paladin like his father and grandfather before him. He lost the title, was not able to do it anymore, and left. And as you can see here, I have his journals, his correspondence letters, internal documents from the Sons of Man that he had, and it really paints a picture of a lot of the history, as well as the rumors that were passed between members. And these are the sources where I get this information about this guy, Rafael Caron, how he was used, what he did, and why I believe that it is him underneath Notre Dame, and that he was used basically to be resurrected and fight things. Okay, so this is something I've been wanting to make a video about for a while now. Those of you who follow me know about the Sons of Man, this Catholic order of supposed exorcists and monster hunters that generations of my family belonged to in the 19th century. Now the question is, are they still around? And I have reason to believe both yes or no, and possibly kind of a combination of both. One element is that Harold, my great-great-great-grandfather, the last of my family to be a member of this organization, he says in his writings that in his time, in the 1860s, that this organization was basically on its last legs, that it had been in decline for well over 100 years, nowhere near the illustrious force that it had been, in medieval times up and through the Renaissance. Seems it was a combination of doing their job well, making it so that most places never had to deal with these kinds of threats, and just, any kind of bureaucracy that an organization deals with. He says that in his time, they only had a few high-ranking members of the clergy still amongst their ranks, and a couple low-level royals. He even said that he believed that he would outlive the Sons of Man. Now, my followers also know there's a complication in that, because my great-grandfather, Harold's grandson, worked with the Psalm, which are pretty obviously the Sons of Man, here in the United States up through the early 1950s. And then, to complicate it even more, as you guys know, when I post videos about some of the stuff that I find, I start getting blocked calls from people with deep pockets who want to buy things, who will not tell me who they are. I get messages, emails, all kinds of things telling me, some of them kind of threatening, never able to track down who they come from. As you also know, I get videos taken down, and they have ridiculous reasons. They say sexual activity or illegal activity, and it really seems to be about specific topics. Several of them were about the Sons of Man or things important to their origins. I've revealed a lot, and whenever I do, that's when all these messages and calls pick up as well. I have had a couple of tense interactions on the phone with somebody unwilling to identify themselves, trying to buy things from me. I have posted one before. I'll go ahead and post it again here.
My house is well monitored and protected, that no one will be able to get in here without my knowing about it, and if they try, they're going to have a very, very bad time. Look, Mr. Alex, what you said in your video was right. If we were the type of people that just did whatever we wanted to, whomever we wanted to, we would have done those things. And nobody here wants to piss off Harold Oldby's ghost and then start to talk all this personal position.
So as you can see, this guy knew about my ancestor, apparently didn't want to get on his bad side, even his spirit. So they are still around in some regard, but I'm not convinced that it's an unbroken chain, and not someone who just picked up the mantle years later. So I want to use this comment to talk about the activity in the house. I know you guys, a lot of you are very interested in that, and really the only reason I haven't been talking about it is that nothing has been happening. Ever since, that in the laundry room, and then afterwards I went under the house and found that container of my great-grandfather's files. It's been basically radio silence. That's very similar to what happened after I found the trunk. I assume, I found what they wanted me to find. I'm doing what they want me to do. So, radio silence. That's all I can. Now, on Frogette, she has also been gone ever since that night. I found her under the house when I was doing my live. I brought her out. Those of you who don't know, it's a doll that moves around the house. She's been gone ever since. The next day, she was just gone from where I had placed her. This is the longest she's ever been gone. I have looked for her a couple times. I have not found her. One more thing that really I didn't think of as related at all, but then there's just some things that make me think maybe it might be. I haven't had any of those dreams about Harold ever since the one where he grabbed me and, said, "What's he doing here? This is impossible." Those have been cut off completely. Same thing with the ones with my grandma, my great-grandfather. No connections there. We all kind of felt, and I thought that there was some kind of connection with them, but that's cut off. But I have been having other dreams that are similarly vivid and emotional, just with the same kind of atmosphere, feeling about somebody who's really not related to any of this at all. Without going into too much detail, I had a very close friend in high school. Afterwards, they went down some kind of bad roads and ended up passing away pretty young. We were very good friends in high school, though, like I said, so, they're always kind of at the back of my mind. I think about them from time to time. But recently, I've been having dreams about them. And, of course, I've had dreams about my old friends from time to time, but these have been, like I said, very vivid, very emotional, just like memories of things that we actually did. But then all of a sudden, usually like the dream ends right after this, he just looks at me. and there's just this very telling look in his eyes, like he's aware of what has happened since that memory. I don't know, you guys have got me to think about things a lot differently on here, and it just seems worth noting. Also, shout out to Morgan's mom too for the comment. You're a longtime follower. I really appreciate you. You comment a lot. Keep it up. Love you. Thank you. Hey everybody, slow weekend here on the TikTok, but for me it was actually an incredible weekend for new leads. A lot of you guys know I haven't really talked much about my great-grandfather Leopold for a long time. We've been focused on Harold, his grandfather. That's just because, I had run down every lead I had. I couldn't find anything else. That changed this weekend. Some of you saw my live, some of you saw the other videos, but I was at Spookalla. Spookalla is this really awesome horror convention located kind of close in Ocala, Florida. They had a lot of awesome guests. Apparently it was the first year, but it was a really, really cool convention. And while I met a lot of incredible people, the real big news for me, author Mark Muncy. If you know who this guy is, he's basically the greatest living expert on Florida paranormal. I bought his book, Eerie, Florida, months ago to help research some of this stuff, because, not all of it's as easy to find on the internet as you think. And he's got a ton of books about, creepy stuff in Florida. Basically everything paranormal, and not just Florida. I know he has books about other places as well. Now, the really good thing for me is that he knew exactly who my great-grandfather was, Leopold Oldry. He's heard a lot of stories about him. He knows some stuff about him. He knows people who probably have more, maybe first-hand experience with him, and he's more than willing to share that with me. I'm arranging to meet with him in Tampa at some point. We talked about some of the things. If you remember when in Leopold's journals, when I found things about Robert the Doll, about the St. John's River Monster, all that stuff, I mentioned there were other things that I couldn't find what they were about, like addresses, details about other cases he worked or that he advised on, but I didn't know what they were. It seems that Mark does have that information, and he's more than willing to share, so we're going to go over the whole journal and try to see what we can figure out. Mark is also on TikTok. He's here at Eerie Travels. I'm going to go ahead and tag him below. You should definitely go check him out, give him a follow, check out his videos. Really, really amazing stuff. I don't know about you guys, but I'm super excited. I mean, I love learning about Harold. All that stuff is incredible, but Leopold just feels a little bit closer to home. I remember my grandmother. I knew her as a child, and this is her dad. So I don't know. I'm just really excited to find something new.